We'll post this video on YouTube today, though, so they'll have access to it. They'll be aware.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, excellent. So this meeting is officially started. This is the meeting of the Governance Committee for the Recovery Council. Anyone that's listening in, welcome to our meeting. And I thank you, and I thank all the members for attending the meeting. The only real order of business we have is to look at the slate of individuals from the council that have been nominated for offices. And I think you all got them. The officers look like the three positions, chair, treasurer, and secretary, are all the same as they were this past year. They have all been nominated by more than one person, and they have all accepted to allow their name to go in nomination. The only contested, I shouldn't say contested, the only one that has two people that have been nominated is for the vice chair position, and that is Courtney and Eric have both been nominated and both accepted that that they would take on that responsibility if voted in. Any questions about that?
My only question that was that are you also able in January to take any nominations from the floor, or is this it?
See, that's the thing I don't know. There's nothing in the bylaws, to my knowledge, and Brendan, certainly please chime in, that states any deadline other than names placed in nomination must be at least 30 days before the annual meeting. So I don't know if that wording discludes any nominations from the floor. And that I would need a clarification from Brendan.
And I'm looking at section 5.1 of the bylaws. It designates the sort of standard officers, chair, vice chair, treasurer, and a secretary. And I take it that those are the, ones that we would need a slate for that we're talking about here. It also provides that the council can create additional officers. So the language specifically is, the officers of the council shall be so-and-so, and such other officers as the council may from time to time designate. And I take the time to time mean that it can, in between annual meetings, designate additional officers as it needs. But, I would also as it determines that it has sort of standing officers of particular, not, whichever ones they are, that from that point on, they would be sort of annual meeting, voting.
I don't, maybe I missed something in the translation, Brendan, but I don't think that answers the question of whether in addition to the slate, there can be nominations on January 11th from the floor of additional candidates.
I think, Gordon, if it's additional candidates for the standing positions that this group is putting forward a slate for,
right.
I think, there's nothing in the bylaws that prohibits that. Whether or not the council thinks it should, and all nominations for those positions should be funneled through this committee, is perhaps something the council can figure out. But at this point, there's nothing in the bylaws that prohibits, nominations from the floor for the existing positions.
Okay. Nor is there anything that expressly permits it. So I think what you propose makes sense, that perhaps the council itself could make that decision. In other words, go ahead, Courtney.
The one thing I would say is, Brendan, doesn't it say it has to be submitted to the council 30 days before?
Yes.
So
By the-
to me, that would read that there's no floor nominations. But again, not a lawyer yet.
But that's how I interpret it also, Courtney.
So it provides that this committee has to, advance to the council at least 30 days, a slate of the nominees
So
for
that's our
officers.
duty. Our duty is to advance the slate, but it
Correct.
doesn't provide for a decision on whether or not floor nominations.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at this is it establishes a sort of standard process to channel the nominations, of who wants to be an officer through this, committee, and establishes this, kind of regular process that gives the council the ability to, consider things in due course. But I don't think that expressly prohibits, a direct nomination from the floor. Maybe this procedure is preferable because it works better for the council. But I don't see anything that prohibits a direct nomination from the floor at the time.
And I only,
Whether it's preferable or not is kind of up to the council. I mean, a council member can move to, I think, nominate somebody else for a position that hasn't been advanced by the governance committee.
I raise the question only because we're well aware that in the one position that's contested, that a successful candidate has to get 10 votes. And in our previous election, that was not achieved. So the position remained vacant. And all I'm suggesting is that should we arrive at that same spot, it might be possible then to nominate a different candidate and try to achieve a successful election for the position. That's the only reason I asked the question. And I mean, I think there's two ways of getting there. One is to allow nominations from the floor. Another would be if the two candidates, for instance, were willing to withdraw, then the position would be vacant and could arguably be filled by a new nomination. But again, I'm speculating, but I think it's best going into the election that we all know what the rules are. So I appreciate that discussion.
Yeah, I think it's valid that we have that because we did not get that the last time around. And we sort of bypassed it by making the two people at large members because it wasn't a full term. But now we're running into a full term year and we're hoping to have all offices complete and filled. But again, we don't want to go back to the governance committee. The ideal would be that at that January meeting, we come out of that meeting with a full slate of offices, or at least a plan. But I think if I'm hearing right, I can even ask people to place a vote to say that they want to open nominations at the meeting.
Can I
The one
offer?
thing I,
Yeah,
sorry,
go ahead,
Brendan, go
Courtney.
ahead. Nope, go ahead.
The reason that I sort of pointed to the language in 5.1 that I was thinking about is because, and I offer this suggestion with some trepidation because I don't, I haven't discussed it with any of you first, so I don't know what the appetite is for this kind of idea. But it's entirely possible. The council, the council has the authority to create a second vice chair position, under section 5.1. And, Pat, I think as you've seen over time, the management of the council is complicated and a lot of work, and it may benefit from a tag team approach on vice chair. But again, I haven't had a chance to discuss that with you, and I apologize for raising this concept, blind in this meeting. But I, that is another approach rather than having a vacancy in the vice chair the council could be offered the opportunity to elect two vice chairs, and the vice chairs can ideally work together to, figure out who's going to cover what responsibilities. A bit of uncharted waters here, but I raise it for your consideration.
I really appreciate that, Brendan.
Yeah.
I hadn't considered that, and I think because, particularly as we go into this next phase where we're actually going to be making important decisions affecting spending and, I think we're all interested in avoiding contentiousness, and we're seeking collaboration, but we are confronted by this very somewhat unusual position, language in the court document, that we have to achieve consensus or a 3/5 vote, and those decisions were made for us, and that has already presented one challenge. So I think it's a really innovative way that it's another alternative that the council can consider if we get stuck on the 11th. So I really appreciate that conversation.
I do just want to raise my concern about floor nominations. I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but I am saying it could set us up for more contested races.
I think I agree with that, Courtney. I think the solution is maybe that if we have the election, we cannot, like last time, cannot get to 3/5 vote, that we place as a suggestion that we do the two vice chairs. If we can't get a consensus, which I think would be better than just taking nominations from the floor. I think this would be a much smoother process, and we can define what roles each of them, and there's plenty of work to do. So it's not like they wouldn't have something to do as an officer if we had two vice chairs.
And Pat,
go ahead.
let me flesh out two important aspects. Important to me. I guess, to the extent that the governance committee, decides to make that motion and, to the council, I would recommend that it add to the motion two things. One, that it term limits the kind of, two vice chair concept to the particular year, so that it ends, so that it has to be renewed every year at the annual meeting, because it could be that you don't need a second vice chair in future years. In addition, I would also recommend that the motion clarify that the role in the event that there are multiple vice chairs, that the vice chairs, approach the language in section 5.5 that says the vice chair that in the absence of the chair, the vice chair shall perform the duties of the office of the chair, that the two vice chairs alternate the sharing of those duties, so that there isn't any disagreement about, who ought to do it.
Yep.
Not disagreement, but so that nobody has to think about it.
Correct.
Well,
Great.
we're running out of time, and I
We are.
hesitate to raise this issue because we do want to I'm willing to make a motion to advance the slate as presented to the council. But Brendan, if you could be thinking about how the issue of succession, were there a resignation of the chair, the issue of succession would need to be resolved. And that's an important consideration if there's two vice chairs and one, because I believe there's a provision there that if they're in the absence of the chair, that the vice chair would be the de facto chair. So just something to think about. But to really move things along, Pat, if it's
Yeah,
if
we
it's
only have
appropriate,
3 minutes.
I'm willing, I will move that the slate that's been presented this morning to us be advanced to the Recovery Council for voting at the January 11th meeting, and that we advance it to them in advance of the December 14th meeting.
Do I hear a second? Chair,
Second.
okay, Courtney seconded. Okay, I guess we have to call a roll.
Haley, you're muted.
Betsy, Courtney, Gary Allen,
Yes.
Pat Kimball,
Yes.
Gordon Smith,
Yes.
and Eric would be. So the people who aren't here aren't counted for like voting purposes of reaching 66%, right? Okay, cool.
Correct. All right. I thank you all. It was a great conversation. We will certainly sort out some of those issues about the suggestion of the co-chairs before we get there in January. But I thank you all for your time and effort. And some of you I will see again in the next Zoom.
I think you'll see us all.
I think so.
Okay. I'll
Thank
go to
you.
the other Zoom. I move we adjourn. Thanks.